My name is Stephen Wong, and I connect university-based scholars to broader audiences of policy analysts, funders, practitioners, entrepreneurs, basically anyone who is eager for the ideas and insights that are developed in scholarly research. For those of you that are less familiar with IHS, we are an academic institute that partners with scholars to produce high quality research on important topics in the broad liberal tradition. Our mission is to draw scholarly attention back to intellectual liberalism through civil discourse and its principles and critiques. We challenge presuppositions, sharpen our ideas, and cultivate an open academic community. We support scholars throughout their careers, offering resources, mentorship, partnership opportunities, and access to a passionate and supportive community of intellectuals and scholars that is gathered here today. We are so excited to have partnered with Cosmos to provide some specialized funding to university-based scholars so that scholars can do some experimentation with research tools that leverage artificial intelligence. And we've partnered this with a community of practice so that scholars working at various universities also have a network that they're experimenting with these tools with, sharing best practices, kind of building a community within our community. I'll make sure to share the link to that application over the course of our conversation today, just so everyone has it. Before we jump in, just a couple quick housekeeping items. We are recording the program today. Also, feel free to use the Zoom chat function to share resources, links, to ask questions. The format of our program, we'll hear from our guest speaker, Brendan, and then Brendan McCord, and then we'll hear a panel discussion led by Shane Cortland from the IHS team before going into a group Q&A time. So we've reserved about a third of our time together for Q&A, so please don't hold back in asking those questions. It is my pleasure to now introduce one of today's distinguished guests, Brendan McCord. Brendan is the founder of Cosmos Institute and really has been a leading voice in the conversation around philosophy and emerging technology. It is my privilege to welcome Brendan today for some opening comments. So, Brendan, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. And hi, everybody. I'm Brendan McCord, founder of Cosmos Institute, and it's great to be here with you. So, I want to start by briefly explaining why I'm here and why Cosmos exists. For most of my career, I've been in the world of pure technology. I have dispositionally aimed at public purpose, but I've been building AI systems, acting as a founder, focusing on the how and the speed of technological innovation. Then I had two kids, I have a 4 and 6-year-old, and I sold those two companies, and everything changed. Guided by bigger questions about what to model for those kids, what it meant to live well, I discovered the classical liberal canon. And I was guided in this by an IHS alum who gave me a 17-page syllabus, the gift of a lifetime. I spent 15 minutes per day reading it. That was all I could do. I had effectively lost the muscle while building two startups. But bit by bit, that became 3-4 hours a day, and it transformed my life. Now I find myself living a double life. I spend half my time in the tech world. I spend half my time reading books at places like St. John's College, taking red eyes to Oxford to teach a graduate seminar on philosophy and AI each spring. And when I walk across the campus at Oxford, I often feel like I'm taking off one costume and putting on another. I'm moving from a world that is obsessed with acceleration to a world that is obsessed with understanding. But in that seminar room, I've noticed something worrying. I look at Rhodes scholars, I look at brilliant engineers, I look at people who will build our future, and I sense that much of their training has been in how to give answers. It's been in how to summarize any argument, to perfectly execute my prompt to arrive at the correct answer in real time. The problem is, AI is now the ultimate answer machine. It can do much of the performative work faster and better than any human. And if we're honest, the same dynamic that I see with students often shapes how scholarship itself gets produced. The pressure to publish, to optimize for metrics, to perform rigor rather than pursue it. That realization led to the founding of Cosmos. If we want a future that promotes human flourishing in the AI age, the critical deficit isn't more technicians who can generate answers. We need philosopher builders, people who have the technical literacy to understand the tools, but crucially, the philosophical depth to ask the right questions. That's why I'm talking to you, the scholars, the faculty, the researchers. You are the custodians of that depth. Cosmos is partnering with IHS because we share a big commitment to the world of ideas, to the classical liberal tradition of open inquiry, to its relationship to free societies. But I also want to give credit where credit's due. This pilot program was largely inspired by one of your own, so to speak, from this network, Kevin Vallier. And you'll hear from him in a moment. Kevin helped us see that scholars are often presented with a false choice regarding AI. You either ignore it and hope it goes away, or you treat it as a productivity hack for the same old work. We think there's a third option. Kevin's a philosopher's philosopher. He does too. And we wanted to create a program where scholars could use AI to extend the frontiers of inquiry itself. That's why we launched the AI Accelerated Scholarship Program. This is a grant, but not only that. It's a call to action for the humanities to stop watching from the sidelines and start shaping how these tools are used in the creation of knowledge, the pursuit of truth. I want to be specific about what we mean by the AI Accelerated Scholarship. The name might suggest that we want you to write faster. And that's the least interesting thing that AI can do. Most of the world uses AI to automate the product of scholarship, the text. We want you to use AI to deepen the process, to deepen the inquiry. The mental model probably should not be that of a typewriter that thinks for you. What's the right mental model? We hope to learn that from you. Maybe it's a flight simulator for human reason. Maybe it's a sparring partner, steel manning the strongest counter arguments. Maybe it's a connection engine, something that surfaces bridges between 18th century political economy and modern developments that would take months to do. Maybe it's a topology mapper that lets you explore question spaces, dependency graphs of, questions and topics, so you can see what's known and where the jagged edges of the unknown are. That brings me to the structure of the program. So I mentioned it's a grant program. In part, we're providing funding and tools. But the most critical element of this is what Stephen said earlier, it's the community. We know academic research can be a solitary pursuit. We know staring at a blinking cursor on ChatGPT and trying to figure out how to make it useful for high-level philosophy is daunting. We think experimental inquiry is best done within a voluntary community. So we wanted to create a space where you can share prompts that work, prompts that failed. You have a feedback loop. You're not just consumers. You're telling each other and you're telling the builders, people like, the incredible engineers within the Cosmos community, what should the tools actually do? How else, if not through that mechanism, can we build a republic of letters for an algorithmic age? I want to close with a note of optimism. In our conversations with IHS, I have heard that many faculty members feel like they've missed the boat on AI, like it's moving too fast, like the college freshmen will get it and everyone else is just structurally behind. I am here to tell you that you haven't missed anything. You're arriving at exactly the moment when the hard questions are becoming unavoidable, the questions about knowledge and interpretation and judgment and freedom and the role of education. We're in the very first inning of a very big transition. Most of what passes for AI expertise right now is surface level tinkering. And that's okay. But the deep work, integrating AI into serious scholarship, has barely begun. And that work can't be done by software engineers alone. It must be done by you. You have the domain expertise, the training and interpretation and context, and you understand what genuine inquiry requires. The Enlightenment wasn't built by people who waited for permission. It wasn't marked by abdication about the new possibilities that science and technology open. Neither will this be. I invite you to apply. I invite you to experiment. I invite you to help us figure out what becomes possible when we combine the best of humanities with the power of this new technology. Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan. I would like to briefly, before getting the other panelists on, introduce myself and tell you a little bit about me before I get to them. So, my name is Shane Cortland. I am the Senior Director of Technical Innovation at IHS. My team, specifically, we're committed to getting technology into the hands of scholars and researchers, like many of you who are on the call. And I'm happy to be at an organization that, like Cosmos, recognizes the importance of this time. And one of the things that my team started to do is we reached out to scholars like you all and basically just asked, what were the challenges that you were facing, just to see if we could find if there were any sort of technical solutions that could help in this regard. And the first people we went to were people in the policy world, and which shouldn't surprise many people on this call. People who are interested in public policy have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of texts to have to go through. And it's a lot of hours, a lot of labor, a lot of expense to get through this text. Well, one of the things that we noticed pretty quickly, my team and IHS, is that AI can help a little bit with this, at least help you find what you're looking for. So we have a platform, and Stephen Wong will put some of these links in the chat right now. And the platform is Scholar's Edge. In Scholar's Edge, we have, for example, policy search. And this is like what I said when it comes to those who are doing research in public policy. Is that it will allow you to use AI to efficiently search through both laws, regulations, and bills at the state and federal level. And it's a comprehensive collection of all. On top of that, you will also be able to go through federal testimony, basically taking what would be weeks and rendering it into hours, right? Likewise, what we have is we work with researchers like yourselves, and you, of course, create outputs like articles, papers, projects, various white papers and so forth. And we want to spread this as far and wide as possible and make it easy to search. So another feature that we have on Scholar's Edge is we have an AI-enabled search through all of our papers, well over 100,000 of them. Right. And you could then see anybody in our network. You can do a search basically by talking or asking about certain topics. And you will find scholars who we've worked with who work on those topics. And you can refine the search as you will. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We continue to develop. We have Energy Grid Radar that's coming up, which will basically go through all the major grid operators in the United States. Energy is going to be a big issue, and it brings the data to you. Right. And so the basic principle behind Scholar's Edge, and it's the basic principle behind all the tools that we've developed, is that we want to basically take the things that are keeping researchers from research and lessen them or remove them as best we can so you can stay immersed in the research as much as possible. And so if you are looking on Scholar's Edge, and there will be a link that's going to be sent to you, and you don't find exactly what you're looking for, right? Ask us, we may be developing it already, or reach out to me directly and we can actually help work through it. And we may be developing a next tool because all our tools come through these conversations. Now, enough of me. Let's go to the panel, right? I'm going to ask the first question. And the first question, I'll name you by name and we'll go from there and I will allow us to jump forward. So first, introduce yourself and tell us about your current research. Let's start with Shoshana.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Shoshana Weissman at the Abundance Institute. I just moved over from the R Street Institute, and I still almost always default to saying R Street. But I'm not working on anything right now. But I've worked on a lot of different research projects, a lot of just explaining how policy works, explaining possible pitfalls with them, stuff like that. But also large databases. I love my databases and getting to work with them. And I'll be talking about some of my more interesting ones today.
Excellent. Kevin.
I'm Kevin Valier. I'm a professor of philosophy at the Institute of American Constitutional Thought and Research here at the University of Toledo. I'm a political philosopher, but also a wannabe political theologian and a wannabe political economist. So I work at the edges of fields on a variety of questions in religion and politics, trust and polarization, and increasingly in not just classical liberal, but fusionist conservative thought and the political economy of AI.
Excellent. So first question here on my part. So in your own work, can you kind of explain to everybody how you've incorporated AI tools already? I'll start again with Shoshana. I first met you when we were actually working tools. So you're one of the people that I owe a debt of gratitude to for helping us out, essentially. So Shoshana, you go first.
Sure, thank you. Well, I love troubleshooting things, especially things that I'm excited about. So it's my pleasure. So lately, what I've been doing more with it is when I feel like my arguments aren't convincing the other side as much, I have a ChatGPT like figure out what I'm not saying that could be helpful. So sometimes I'll say, what are all the possible arguments for or against something? And a lot of times I feel really good when I've like either nailed all of them myself already, and maybe the ones that I didn't latch onto were because it just wasn't like the right kind of time for messaging. I also have it look at different databases. So when I'm working on nerding through a database, I'll upload it and say, what interesting things have you found in here? And it's become a lot better over time. I remember when I first started doing this kind of stuff, it wouldn't really point out what I needed. It had a lot of trouble looking at multiple factors of the data and comparing them. And I had to guide it a lot more, but it's become a lot better with that. But I think the biggest thing it's been helpful with is finding if I'm doing something that's more comprehensive, like looking through every similar kind of law across a lot of different states, then being able to figure out like how to find those similar laws if they don't have the exact same language. About a year ago, I did one of these, basically like a 50 state report for a friend just to help him out with something he was working on. And it was really interesting, but it was an area of law that I wasn't familiar with. And I wasn't familiar with all the different terms used, but using Scholar's Edge was amazing. I don't know how I would have even come close to getting finished with it without it, because it found so many different laws that I wasn't able to find on my own. Because I went through a bunch of processes. Like usually when I'm using AI, I'm also using non-AI methods at the same time trying to figure stuff out. But it's just so you can really get AI to be really, really comprehensive with that kind of research. You need to prod it a bit and try some different methods and maybe a couple of different prompts. Like in Scholar's Edge, I think I had like 4 different kinds of prompts, and I would run it for each state to make sure. But it was amazing how well it was able to find that. But then it's funny because on the other side, when I asked ChatGPT for the same kind of stuff, it would send me like the same 3 laws over and over again, or like maybe a handful, and it wasn't that good with it. But it's interesting to see how you can use AI in different ways through different tools to give you very different outcomes. Like the Scholar's Edge was amazing, but ChatGPT really failed. But occasionally ChatGPT would find something that Scholar's Edge didn't. So for me, it's kind of like the idea of having research assistants, people who are going to find stuff that you're not finding. You'll find stuff that they're not finding. That's what I found for the success of it so far.
Excellent. Kevin, same question.
Sure. So when I was in graduate school, at Arizona, there was a lot of focus on getting articles on reviews so that you could get a tenure track position, especially on political philosophers. And I developed this process, this production schedule that I had, where I'd work at different projects at different levels of stages of production. So if I was researching something, I would be editing something else and reading for a third thing. And so when I started using AI, really with ChatGPT 3.5, I decided I would apply it to every stage of production. And I have something to say about them all. And I can't go into full detail, but so for instance, for research, using the research reports for Gemini, now Claude, and also ChatGPT, they are all sort of better at different things. So I run the same initial research inquiries with all of them. I get immediately three sort of 6,000 to 8,000 word reports, hundreds and hundreds of sources. I'll never not begin a literature review without those research reports ever again. There's absolutely no reason for me not to. I even encourage, and through IHS's help, my research assistants to use the research reports because it supercharges them. They're so strong, and it's so wonderful for them to have those skills. When it comes to initial drafting, I use AI as a transcriber. I want everything to be in my voice. So if I'm driving to work, I have a 37-minute commute. I open up Otter. .ai, and it transcribes everything perfectly and summarizes things at the end and exports the transcript perfectly into a Word document. And then I have all the sentences that I could possibly want in my voice with AI. The irony, right? Because, it only writes for you. I absolutely run it through the ringer with arguments, like Shoshana suggested. I actually have referee prompts for different journals that I use in order to get it to be as strong as possible. So if there's an economic argument, I have it simulate being editors, particularly at the Journal of Political Economy. That one seems to work really well. And in philosophy, for instance, ethics or Phil Review. And so I just run them. I just, iterate until I get to the point where I think the objections are dumb. Initially, they were all dumb. Now with ChatGPT 5.1 Pro, they are not all dumb. And with editing, Opus 4.5 is a demigod. I mean, it's unreal. And so, for the first time, I've got something that's like a better writer than me in certain ways. And so I just go through and say, just copy edit this and put all the changes in bold, everything that you would add, in bold, everything that you would delete, strike through. There are AIs that are really good for before you submit things. So, as long as things are in my voice, I let AI do anything a research assistant would do. And so I've tested everything I could do. And the method I use, I call rapid iterative refinement, where I just repeat the same kinds of prompts. And the basic idea behind it is this: if you can find prompts that make you slightly better than you would otherwise be, it doesn't matter if they're worse than humans, because you can run them at 1,000 times the speed. And so those little advantages accumulate at each stage. So anyway, I've done it. I've been kind of obsessive about it, but it's been incredibly rewarding. I think I'm doing my best work.
So kind of a follow-up question here on this question, and I'll kind of tip my hand a little bit to kind of show you what I kind of mean by it. So what's the most, how would you say, surprising thing that you've gotten from experimenting with the tech? So my biggest example is when I've been prompting it, when it errors, a lot of people get upset with it, right? They're like, "That's not what I wanted." I find the errors fascinating because it errors in a way that's typically not a human error, right? Because I'm so used to reading student papers, for example. And a lot of the student papers, and I'm sure people here or people in the call understand, is that you get people who are tired or not really invested, and you see errors that are usually associated with that, right? Where the errors in AI, it's not tired. It doesn't get tired, and it errors in really clever and interesting sort of ways. So even the errors for me are interesting. So we'll go again, Shoshana. What has surprised you the most here when you've experimented with it?
It's funny. It's some of what I've been talking about before, where it's I was surprised how bad at first it was a data analysis. I haven't had a chance to run the data through it again because I'd be curious what a newer version of ChatGPT did. It's funny. I've tried other models too, but I like ChatGPT more than the others so far. I'm not sure if it's just me, but some people like make fun of me for not using Claude or others. But I've wanted to run the data. It's funny. This one was for the Sloth Institute. I FOIA'd the government for sloth import and export data, and the Sloth Institute used it to help protect sloths. They just got sloths listed in sites, which I forget a little bit what it stands for, but basically it's a step in the direction of sloth protection. But it was so interesting to me at first, like how bad it was with data analysis. But I think it would be a lot better now. But it's great with editing. I totally agree that it's great with editing. But every now and then it makes some silly mistakes where I'm kind of surprised that like not that it's a mind, but that a mind as good as it would be so bad with it. And then I think the other thing that surprised me was the way and it's not a conversation with Scholar's Edge, but the way it thought through like comparing different kinds of laws, like the ones that would pull in, the ones that wouldn't. Like that was where I think I got the most out of the errors. Like where did it think that it was finding a law similar to the law that I was looking up and wanted to find laws similar to it. The ones that it picked were really interesting sometimes. Like in some cases, I was like, I don't need this now, but I think in a different circumstance, I get why someone putting in this prompt would want to get this law as a response here. But then other times, like the way it was able to match the purpose of it was really, really great. So to me, it's like it's so interesting finding like some of the mistakes it makes are really interesting. And I think that was one. And it's not even quite a mistake because it's just, people looking for similar laws are going to have different purposes in it. And it was interesting to go through that. But there's more I've wanted to do with it. Like one of the weird things that it's surprisingly bad at is formatting citations. When I give it the right format, it just like will really struggle with them or italicize things it shouldn't or put things in the wrong format. And it's so funny because to me that it's something so simple, just formatting citations, and that you would think it would be so good with it with how good it is with other things. But I know that it's just a feature of AI that it's going to have like its hallucinations and be quirky with things. But I'm excited to see where it goes next and to see some of the more depth in the mistakes. Um, I think the other thing that surprises me too is just how in depth it can be and how comprehensive it can be with some things. But then when it goes to the oversimplifying and generalizing, it's strange how it wants to do that. I don't know if that's just a function of how the internet itself has a lot of content that likes to simplify and generalize. But sometimes I wish it could get out of that a little bit because when it starts putting like when ChatGPT starts giving you long lists of things built out and each one begins with an emoji, that's when you know you need to like start over because it's just going to a really bad place.
Excellent. Kevin, what's surprised you? What's been the big surprise, I should say? Yeah.
This is super wild, but right now behind me, I have Claude Code, the main Anthropic coding interface, and it's running. And it's testing the theorems for decision theory that I wasn't able to develop until I had AI, and proving them in mathematics software, Lean, right now that it's working through. It's actually doing math for me right behind the screen where Zoom is open. And I'm able to get a coding interface to interact between philosophy, economics, and mathematics all at the same time. What AI can do, the most advanced models, is they can lower the cost of translation across disciplines by orders of magnitude. It isn't just that they can translate between languages, they can translate between disciplinary languages. Economists can do much better philosophy, philosophers can do much better economics, with lots of other cases. It's amazing to me where I can take a philosophical argument, say, translate this into an economic model, if a philosopher is getting close to making an economic claim. Or how would we know from an economic perspective whether this claim was true? Or how would we formalize this argument philosophically if this economics argument, is it logically valid? The critical thing here is that, coding is just digital logic. And so as soon as you can vibe code, that natural language coding, anything with an underlying logical substrate can be translated by way of a coding interface. So economics is the logic of choice under scarcity, and philosophy is logic itself. And so you can translate those. I mean, those are the two sort of main sort of methods in the social sciences and the humanities are those forms of logic. So I just think it's extraordinary that I have a machine that's a mathematics graduate student working for me right now. So that's what blew my mind. People say, "Oh, how do you know it's not making errors?" They're good enough now to where they all test each other. But this particular software, if you can't get through the next step in the proof, it stops. So you know, so I just can't even believe what is possible in terms of interdisciplinary work. It's just stunning.
So next question, I'm going to reverse the order. I'm going to go Kevin first this time. Um, so there can, of course, be misuses of technology, right? Just as there can be beneficial uses. We've mentioned some, I think, the really cool and beneficial stuff. And what I'm thinking about here with misuses, we could imagine, say, using technology in a way that compromises human flourishing, right? And we can think of that also in the context of, say, higher education and research generally, and so forth. So the question I have, and we'll start with Kevin and then move to Shoshana, is in the context of artificial intelligence, right? What do you think would be the misuse here? And how do you kind of protect against that? So Kevin, go ahead first.
If you look to Aristotle and Mill about theories of well-being, what really makes for a flourishing life in terms of using one's highest faculties. The best uses of AIs are those that enhance those faculties, or get rid of things that are of less value to free you up to use your higher faculties. And the worst uses of AI are the ones that displace or undermine those skills or faculties. And in general, that's how I track when AI use is good and builds virtue, and when it builds vice. Is it enhancing our highest capabilities, or is it undermining them? So, for instance, I don't let my students use it to write essays. That's a process, a skill that they need to be able to build up. But having someone else do math for me so that I can validate my models at a level of sophistication that weren't possible, that's glorious. And I love that I have a machine that can do it, because it gives me a lot more confidence that when I make a prediction, it's based on a sound model. That when I go to an economist to say, "Hey, look at this," I'm not completely wasting their time. So that's always how I think about it is, what are the ultimate good in terms of using our ultimate or highest faculties? Does it amplify it? Does it undermine it?
Shoshana.
I like that framework. That's a lot fancier than the one I have. For me, it's just making sure that I think one thing is that you have to understand everything you're doing, that if you're using AI to just generate stuff, and it could be very good stuff, but if it's not your stuff, I think that that's not a great approach. Um, uh, I think that's kind of what it comes down to for me, in the way I think about it, that like you want to give credit where due. And if ChatGPT writes a full paper for you and it's a very good paper, but it's not yours, then that's, I think it's worth giving credit to ChatGPT in those circumstances. Um, for I can't really think of anything else that I would say is you know that you shouldn't be doing with it. I guess any obvious plagiarism that you should, the words should be enough your own to make sure that they are your own, that if it's editing or if it's creating words for you, that it should still be enough your own, and that defensibly so. And I'm sure people are going to use it in ways they shouldn't. I think the biggest example of this kind of comes down to the judges who are using AI, or the lawyers using AI. Like, it's fine if they're using AI and there's nothing wrong with that, but when they're hallucinating citations and stuff like that, that's pretty bad. Like, that's pretty egregious. In some of the cases I've heard, like with the judges, that it might have been their clerks, but it's still, to me, it's still, you should still be reviewing the work and make sure that your clerk's work is good, just like you would with AI or with anything else. But I think those are like the worst cases of it I've seen, or the lawyer who I think repeatedly got caught using AI and hallucinating citations and all that. That everything should just be as factual or more factual than if you did it yourself. But those ones are the ones that always come across my feed, and I'm always like, man, just check your work, like just like anything else, just check your work.
Speaking of technology, I just misused the mute button. So um, this is a little bit more of a meta question. And please forgive me as I've been working more in development of these tools. I'll start using these neat little terms like workflow and use cases and so forth. But what I often find, and I often worry that this is like some of the issues that we have, especially with, like, say, some of my fellow colleagues in the humanities, is that in order to incorporate the tech like AI, it's a really different workflow for them, at least when they think it is, because they haven't experienced it before. And it's a new thing. They've been doing it for so many years, right? They're accustomed to it. And the thing I want to ask both of you is that there are some things that it seems really easy to bring in, say, AI to help you with. And then there are other things where there maybe are extra steps that make it more difficult to bring AI in as far as a habit or workflow. So I kind of want to know, what are those easy and difficult things? And how do you kind of navigate with basically taking on a new process, especially because both of you, you've done work in this area long before this tech was available to you, right? And so you have to change now that there are these new sorts of tools. And what have been sort of your like victories? What have been your struggles in that regard? So I'll go again. I'll start with Kevin. Kevin?
My workflow has changed wildly. And the main way it has changed is that when the AI is good at, say, a research task or an editing task or something along those lines, I can run it in multiple instances. So, for instance, if I'm doing anything in PPE, to philosophy, politics, economics, and there's a technical thing that needs to be worked out, or a research report that needs to be run in political science, while the economics is working something out, or there's something in machine learning I don't know. I'll have different tabs open working on different tasks, and so instead of doing like one thing and then another thing, I didn't like to multitask before. Um, Now it's like if I don't multitask, then I'm sitting around for like 10 minutes. And so the main thing that I'm doing now is, I do multiple things at the same time, but because I'm using the best reasoning models, it isn't that disruptive because, if I need GPT 5.1 Pro to verify a theorem or whatever, and it takes 18 minutes, then I can go do a bunch of stuff. Um, so that's the main thing that's happened is I pushed myself into this newer area of I'm doing a lot more formal decision theory, as I've indicated, because now I did a little bit before, but now the tools make it easier. And so there's just a lot of details that I might leave to RAs, but I can just push through and then go do something else, and focus on writing up the concepts. So that's the main thing that's changed for me is multitasking and cross pushing the models to do things while they're processing. But what I do recommend for people when they use it, if they have subscriptions to the best reasoning models. That's what I mean. I'm not like always going back and forth between instantly responding things. I'm shoving a task onto one of the big models and then doing other stuff.
Prashant.
Yeah, I'm not sure a lot has changed for me. I always multitask, so I think that that's kind of
Oh,
innate
yeah.
in me, which is funny. Um, but I think for me, it's just getting used to asking AI more for stuff that I usually want to take the first stab at a lot of stuff myself and make sure that I know where I'm going with it. But getting used to going to ChatGPT and saying, "Can you edit this?" and like let me know what changes you would suggest making here, and about how all of them make sense most of the time, but for various reasons I often don't like the changes, or I don't fully agree. Or even with data analysis, like I might sit in a spreadsheet for a while and sit thinking through the best way to do something, and I need to get in the habit of like asking AI for it. Even with legislative research, just making sure I'm going to Scholar's Edge and checking there, especially when I want something comprehensive or I'm looking up if the laws ever exist. It's kind of just building that new muscle. um and I rebuild that muscle a lot with a lot of different things. But for me, since most of my job right now is, so I'm digital director, but I also do scholarship. But because my full job isn't research, it takes a little bit more time sometimes to build in that muscle and stuff. But one area for me where it came fast isn't research, but it's coding through Zapier, so automating digital tasks. And because it was so good at coding, and I do not know how to code. Like I know nothing about Python, but ChatGPT could write amazing Python. I just kept going to it because before I was Googling for hours to try to figure out a small piece of code or like to write a small regex. But then with ChatGPT, I was able to just have it write the code. And for a while, it wouldn't know the right format it needed the code in. It sounds silly, but just knowing how to define output in the right way that I needed it. I was often too lazy to like go in and fix it and check. And I just wanted ChatGPT to do it for me. But over the last couple of months, it just gets it right every time. I just tell it, I'm coding in Zapier. This is what the module looks like. This is what the inputs are named. They're dynamic, stuff like that. But that muscle got built really fast because it was just so massively useful. So I think with research, as I find the same stuff there, it'll be helpful. I mean, in research, I guess one area that it's been helpful in is when I think I have good arguments, but I'm not convincing people enough, and I need more arguments or more ways to think about something. That's when I think that muscle has been built a little bit faster to try to realize that it's going to think about things differently than I do, and it's going to have ideas that I'm not having about how to message stuff and how to communicate stuff, and even other areas of research to look into. But I think the muscle kind of gets built on the utility. So it's funny because as I'm listening to Kevin talking about it, I'm like, yeah, like if it's that useful for you, you're gonna fall into those habits a little bit faster for sure.
And I should say, anyone who for coding, y'all, Claude Code. It's like you should see everyone on Twitter on Opus 4.5 is going nuts. Like AI Twitter's just melting down on how good the model is. If you're doing coding, writing, Excel sheets, you gotta try it.
So another question. Now, both of you have done some experimenting, and a lot of great and I think interesting both introspection of what you're doing and learning how to use these tools in creative and interesting ways. One of the questions, because Scholar's Edge, we're partly, of course, committed, of course, working together with the people in our community to develop these things. But likewise, our partnership here with Cosmos, we're trying to create kind of a community of practice where we get not just people individually doing this sort of experimentation, but we want people to kind of come together and do it. What kind of benefits do you think that we can get from having such a community of practitioners come together and experiment with such tools? Let's start with Shoshana this time. Shoshana.
Sure. I think just finding different use cases for it. Like when I talk with different people using AI in different ways, I've always found that people are using it in ways that I never thought of. Like when Kevin was talking, he had a bunch of ideas that I had never thought of or ways of approaching it that I wasn't thinking of. But I think lots of people are just going to think about how to use the technology differently and have different use cases. So I think that ends up being the best way. And if people are collaborating too, I think the more hands-on approach of showing someone else how they're doing it or giving people ideas is helpful. Like with my coding, I've tweeted a lot about it, and so many people are shocked at how well ChatGPT did with code. I know Claude's better, but I'm lazy. I just want to use one system. But I think that ends up being a really good way to go about it. I've also learned approaches and even the copy editing thing. I think that was originally a suggestion I saw from someone else. So when you have a lot of people together thinking about stuff, they're going to think about it differently, especially when it's something so practical like this. So I think you're going to have a lot of people who are going to think of stuff that I've never thought of myself either.
Kevin.
Yeah, it's the amazing thing is you can ask these machines anything because they're chatbots. And so the space of possibilities is probably very widely unmapped, broadly unmapped. And so it's just important to bear that in mind. And on top of that, I would say in a community of scholars on this stuff, give each other permission to talk about what you're doing with it, to pool information. There's so much prejudice against it in the academy that's based on staggering levels of ignorance about how the models work, staggering levels of ignorance about how the models work, that giving people the permission just to talk, to say, look, maybe we'll eventually decide some uses are out, but let's just figure out what we're actually doing. We're not going to judge each other for what we're doing. Maybe some of us decide one way or the other. Maybe there are some things that we shouldn't be doing with it. But if we're not even talking about what's possible, if we don't even know what each other are doing, we don't have any common knowledge really, that's a problem. How are we going to decide what to do unless we know what we're doing? And so that's what I would just say is for the community of scholars here, of people getting involved, give each other permission to be creative, to buck certain kinds of norms, to share information. Um, because why would it be better just to randomly censor each other? I mean, it's amazing if you follow my Facebook. I get a lot of hostility, but I just decided, look, I'm straight up going to be the guy that is just like, here is what I do with it, and just talk about it. And if people are mean, they're mean. Because I wanted to be someone that would just be like, okay, come at me. You get tenure, you're supposed to do that kind of thing. So I decided I would. But a lot of people write me privately because they're afraid to say anything publicly because they don't want to get attacked. So I would just say, like, as the community is being built, like, just give each other permission to talk about it. Have that be an understanding that you're trying to pull information and trying to understand what's possible.
Stephen, we're now going to be moving to our general Q&A, so I will bring back my colleague. Thank you guys for the great panel so far.
Yeah, thank you, Shane, Shoshana, and Kevin. Welcome back, Brendan. We have received a number of great questions so far in our program, and I'll start just with four questions to the group, and then whoever can wants to respond can. These come from our participants. Two of the questions are pretty straightforward, and then two are a little bit more, you guessed it, philosophical. So, which AI is good for copy editing? Which AI tool or chatbot, I suppose, is good for copy editing? Related question, have any of you tried using AI for some more creative aspects of research, such as idea generation and exploration? So, those are a couple more straightforward questions. And on to the more philosophical. Uh, I wonder how the speakers think about and mitigate model sycophancy. This person's biggest fear is that the models make this person, the user, feel like they're having deeper and deeper insights into a particular topic when in fact they might not be, and the model is just kind of making them feel good. And then another more philosophical question. In light of errors that AI makes, and that came up in the panel discussion, do any of you believe that our interpretation or definition of errors could change?
So I'll take the creativity one to start just because I really liked Kevin's point about not just translating languages, but translating across disciplinary spaces, disciplinary semantics. And I think what's great about AI is the ability to do what I'll call combinatorial creativity. What I mean by this is if there are concepts that are distant in whatever high dimensional latent space, let's say, human bias separates these, right? You see this in when institutes calcify, when they have a humanities department and a science department or whatever, we are basically like shackling those concepts to some structure. And of course, we hope that these structures evolve and all that. But the point is, we have really, really powerful biases that put these concepts into little buckets. AI doesn't have that. It can collide, it can force those collisions between fields that appear to us to be very unrelated. And then as long as you have domain expertise in one or are, a good thinker, a good skeptic, you can kind of filter the noise from the signal, because that's the other challenge is like when Kevin is getting some insight from anthropology or, category theory, like, you don't have the expert, not everyone has the expertise to make those determinations. So you have to have some grounding technique. Creativity that is truly out of distribution, I think, is a different problem. And I think it's a harder problem. But the combinatorial creativity is very available.
We can do first three questions for copy editing right now. Opus 4.5. You just subscribe to Claude, but it's incredible. For creative aspect, Opus for text, voice mode is a little mixed. ChatGPT voice mode is the best one. It's still based on their older model, so it's dumb. They used to have standard voice, which was incredible. for brainstorming. Eventually, they'll update it, probably in the next couple of weeks. Um, so whenever I drive to work, I have a 37-minute commute. I just throw it up on my dash. I put in voice mode. I have auto record the conversation, and I just brainstorm with it for half an hour some days, maybe 2 days a week. Then that's all recorded. And so I just go back and forth with it. Now, sometimes it just says, that's amazing or whatever, but you've articulated it. And so you figure out what you're thinking. That brainstorming is key. It's not that it's giving you ideas, it's helping you have a sounding board for your own ideas. So as long as you don't go in expecting it to have insights, go in expecting it to give you the chance for you to have insights. It's really cool for that. It's really cool for that. On model sycophancy, I've thought a great deal about this because I worry that it happens to me all the time. And so I have a multi-model method where if you have an insight or something like that, what one model says is great, you present it in the third person to other models and say, ChatGPT says this, so to Gemini and to Claude. And then you go back and forth. They're usually not sycophantic in exactly the same way, and not when they think the person or machine offering it are different subjects. So if you use multiple models, usually I use Claude, Gemini, Grok, and the bigger the insight is, and I think that it is, the more models I use to try to destroy it, to kill it with fire, as I like to say. So that's what you just have to do, is use multiple models. So copy editing, Opus, creative voice mode for a lot of these things is my favorite, and model sycophancy multi-model method.
On my end, I know it's basic, but I've liked ChatGPT for copy editing. I've had some pretty good luck with it. For sycophancy, I haven't had any success with anything, but now I have something to try from what Kevin said, because I've been struggling with that with a couple of different things when I've been trying to research. It's just always telling me I have the best insights, or oh, this is exactly what you should expect, or stuff like that. So now I have something new to try there, because it's been a real pain for me. But normally I would just either start a new chat or do something like that to try. But I never thought about using the different models and stuff. But I think some of it is just being aware when it's talking to you like that, and that it is being sycophantic, and that's just a part of what it's probably going to do sometimes. You just have to work around it, or at least be able to accept that it's just being like that, and that you have to work past it. But now I like the idea of the different model stuff.
Would anyone like to take one of the question about will our definition of errors change in part because we do see AI right now making errors, um, or anything else related to mitigating model sycophancy?
I mean, on sycophancy, I think that you can explicitly prompt for red teaming. This relates to Kevin's technique, but it does work within a single model. So you can either tell the model to adopt a specific persona, like a pain in the ass peer reviewer or something like that. Or you can sometimes just be like, one of the things I like to say is like no 101 stuff. Like you ask it about Hayek, and inevitably it'll be like some road to serfdom silly thing that's like, it's like, okay, got it, and so that's not really sycophancy, but it's just like jolting it to add
Mm.
friction that it is trained to avoid. It's trained through reinforcement learning on human feedback to please and not to do these things. So as long as you jolt it, I would also say read this article about AI provocateurs. That's a great blog post. And if you want to go deeper on the intellectual dimension of that, that's a neat one. We can probably drop that in the chat. On the nature of errors, I think both error and explanation are undergoing a change. It's interesting to think about like the extent to which knowledge is accompanied by an explanation, justified true belief, that kind of thing. Um, and whether AI becomes a kind of like mystical thing that we believe that can kind of produce knowledge that is detached from explanation. I'm not asserting that, but I just think science could change in that way. I also think that ontological errors are more possible as opposed to what I would call syntax errors, meaning like AI is more likely to give you plausible but non-existent realities. It doesn't live in the world. It doesn't have the same grounding that we have that we take for granted just by the way we see the world. That I think pertains to not just our higher faculties, but our lower ones. So it can have things that are not just a failure of mechanics, but a failure on the kind of like deeper ontological dimension. Um, that's what I would offer.
Thank you. There was a comment that was put through the Q&A that someone has an anti-sycophancy hack, has a way to work around some of that by instructing the AI that the work that the user is seeking critique for is not in fact theirs. It's their
Yep.
direct reports
Yep.
or it's
Yep.
their colleagues, and they don't
Yep.
trust them, and so you're kind of
Yep.
turning that AI's interest in you, pleasing you, to benefit your work product ultimately.
Mhm.
So that I think that's a helpful suggestion. Go ahead.
It's okay. I want us to have more questions,
Okay.
be able to, yeah.
Okay. Kevin, there are a couple for you that I'm stringing together. Someone is referencing academic journal that's, prohibited excessive use of AI in submissions, and they're using they've stated that they're using anti or AI detection software in articles. And so, is there a risk for researchers when using these tools? And do you have any thoughts at a high level? Because I'm sure we could go really deep in this, but any thoughts for a pre-tenure academic? Should they be more cautious about publicizing their use of this technology? Any guidelines? I mean, how should that be gamed out for the academic that is not in the position that you're in with tenure?
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts
Hmm.
on that? Because that's a really delicate
Yep.
line to be
Yeah. Yeah. No,
walking.
I have a tremendous amount to say about this. So I'll try to keep it brief. If you look outside of philosophy, like in the APSR, for instance, American Journal of Political Science is a little tighter of a policy. The American Political Science Review is a little bit looser, where you kind of report what you're using it for. You look in the natural sciences, behavioral sciences, a lot of the standard is just, if you used it, what did you do with it? And try not to do these things. That's, I think, the best standards. I think philosophy journals are being ridiculous, frankly. They're basically forcing us to trade off truth for this weird notion of originality that they have, which means they misunderstand the truth. I mean, if we can improve our arguments, we're in the truth business in philosophy. And so saying we can't use the tools to improve our arguments is, to me, it's just like offensive as a philosopher. So I very much disagree with the AI policies that are coming down through some of the journals. I think it's anti-philosophical, fundamentally. I know they don't think that, but they're very wrong. Um, but if you look at the other fields, adjacent fields, they're just a lot more open about it. I mean, Nature will even have you use one of their research assistant AIs. So if I just think that's I think the philosophy journals are making a mistake. Now, as a pre-tenure person, as I say to the junior faculty I professionalize, the first duty of a tenure track academic is to get tenure. And so do the things that are honest and proper to get tenure, and then tell the world to go to hell, which is what I've been doing. But let those of us with tenure who have the responsibility to use it for what it is actually for, to use it for what it is actually for, and say, look, um, there's tenure for a reason. So my hope, though, is from your perspective, in about 3 to 5 years, it's going to become clear, particularly next year as mathematics gets more and more solutions from AI. As the best mathematicians like Terence Tao, Google gave him access to Alpha Evolve, which is an AI that finds mathematics algorithms. And there's a report, his published paper about helping to make progress on about 67 open problems that he was working on with that AI. And if the finest mathematicians in the world are using it to make progress in their field, I think in about 3 to 5 years, particularly if a major conjecture is proven, that it's going to be really hard to resist thinking that the tools could help. So if philosophy is based on logic, analytic philosophy itself is supposed to be modeled on logic and the natural sciences and their method. And if the mathematicians, the natural scientists are finding this useful, we might resist but in silly ways. So pre-tenure, get tenure. Avoid using the tools with the top journals if you're going to target the top journals. Otherwise, don't. Get tenure, get tenure, get tenure. The rest of us, those who have tenure that believe in the technology, we will fight. But I also think we're going to win, just because in the end, I think it's going to become just very obvious as the scientists and the mathematicians make progress that the humanities are being ridiculous about it. So
I'm at a conference or at a workshop right now. I've stepped away from it, obviously, to be with you all today. But one of the things that's come up in the early sessions is even if, and obviously this is a hypothetical, AI were just to pause where we are right now. There was another AI winter, for example. The technology has already started. We've already started on this path. So that kind of goes in maybe in a different way what you're saying, Kevin. A comment that fits in well here. This person uses Claude heavily to outsource various administrative tasks. For example, a sabbatical application because Claude has so much access to this scholar's research. And it created a detailed draft of this sabbatical application that included a breakdown of the project, of timelines. So it's not just research that these tools can be useful for. Obviously, we've kind of focused the program, the AI Accelerated Scholarship Program, to facilitate that. But there's also a lot of experimentation to do on these research adjacent tasks that take up valuable time for anyone, but particularly for a scholar, the time that they need to spend reading and writing. So if I'm not sure if anyone has would like to respond to that. And then another question is, can an AI program be used to evaluate and criticize its own limitations? Can it give a user suggestions for how it might best help in the context of a project and wherever one is at in that project process?
I want to answer this first. Can I answer that second question?
Sure.
Because I want everyone to hear this. Because this is the most useful piece of AI advice I have ever given that everyone likes. AIs actually understand themselves rather well. And the better the AI, the better it understands itself. So there's a common technique called meta prompting. And meta prompting is when you ask the AI to give you a prompt to do the thing that you want it to do. It is better than prompting. I meta prompt all the time. And because they can understand themselves, because they do understand their limitations, meta prompting is actually fabulous. Just go to Gemini, ask it something like whatever free version, and then meta prompt it to do the same thing and then put in that prompt. And then just compare the results. Any of you could do it right now. So I just wanted to throw that in. Meta prompting, meta prompting, meta prompting. So
And I've had a lot of luck with AI for administrative tasks, all different kinds of things. But Zapier's are. I mean, a lot of you do programming, so if you do programming, you don't necessarily need Zapier. But I've enjoyed using Zapier a lot to automate all different kinds of things that can be automated. One big thing is website posting. It's not quite the same stuff that you all need to do, but basically just being able to match data from one spot to another. A lot of the same stuff in spreadsheets, logging new information in spreadsheets. So if part of your research is tracking something and you don't want to have to manually do it yourself, you can also use Google Apps Script. There's a lot of different ways to go about it, but being able to do that and having AI in there, either in if you're using Google Sheets in the cells, if not in the modules, being able to have it add what you need in there has been really helpful. But administrative tasks are basically the top thing that I've used AI for so far. I've done a lot with research for it, but being able to post when I was at R Street, I had over 100 automations, and a good chunk of them, maybe 10 or so, had to do with website posting. So every time editorial sent us a final draft of something, it would take it apart, put it back together in the way that WordPress needed, but also it usually each one had a couple of different AI related tasks, including even just picking the image for the website. And there's a million ways that that kind of stuff could work for research too. A lot of logging information and tracking stuff, and then adding in what you need through AI, categorizing stuff. But there's a lot of, I think, pretty simple stuff that it can do for administrative, for research, for more basic research tasks that you might not want to spend as much time on. The kind of stuff Kevin was talking about before, that you can reserve your brain for the higher level stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Brenda, did you want to get in here? There was a question I think you wanted to address.
Yeah, I've a question, Brendan, that I think you're well positioned to answer. A question, then a comment to respond to. The question is, at what age should we, I think I would guess that means parents, should we give kids access to AI? That's the question. And the comment is that humans make a lot of errors, and we are also sycophantic. Uh, I think the questioner asks, I think there's some AI exceptionalism where people, maybe academics particularly, are holding AI tools to higher standards than they hold other humans. There's a lot of garbage research out there that humans are still citing. For me, for this questioner or commenter, it's a balance of having similar expectations across contexts and across sources. So, a question and a comment for you to respond to, Brendan.
Yeah, on the double standard, I think that's right. I think that the confident confabulation of AI mirrors human pretension. We sound certain, we are often wrong. And AI is grading because it makes that performance kind of obvious. That's useful if you think of it that way, because if you learn to argue with a confident but unreliable machine, you develop skills for reading human texts, because human texts are also full of assertions that deserve skepticism. The point about kids, I have a 4 and 6 year old, they both use AI. They both go to Alpha School in Austin, where they have a time delimited 2 hour use of AI in the morning. And that allows them to quickly advance in academics and then spend the rest of the day not doing that, doing character development, leadership stuff, learning about themselves. Um, and so I really like that. I think active versus passive is a really critical dividing line there. If my daughter is using AI to learn how to garden or to make a solar oven out of cardboard boxes, these are just available examples because she likes doing those kinds of things. I think that's great. If she were using it as part of an algorithmic feed to scroll endlessly on YouTube Kids, I think that's not great. I think passivity and dependence is the biggest concern, and the active use of our capacities is the goal. The last thing I'll say about that is we do tutoring with my kids to augment, and the two things that we focus on are the early rudiments of metacognition and developing a kind of relationship to this new epistemic authority. And what I don't mean it that it is an authority, but that we share authority with it. What I mean by this is like humans will probably need to develop a capacity to reflect on who we are versus what is the pull of algorithmic suggestion if we are part of a hybrid decision making unit. Our ancestors did not have to do that. We do. And so having an early ability to reflect on one's own thinking versus getting nudged into oblivion is probably important. And then going hand in hand with that, being able to question sources and truth, even when the thing feels like a tool, feels like an exoskeleton of yours, but really has a different epistemic status, is going to be important as well. I think age 4 is probably the very earliest you could start planting the seeds, but I think you can do it, and I think it's wise to do so.
Thank you. I see one question about the Cosmos IHS AI Accelerated Scholarship Program that I can quickly address. I will also put the link on the IHS website that has more information about that program. It is open to university-based scholars that are eager to experiment with these AI research tools that leverage artificial intelligence to do your own work and your own research. So, one of the biggest questions we've gotten is, well, I don't study AI. and that's fine. We're funding projects that are not specifically looking at AI, but there is a question about how the AI technology or the scholar is also wondering how they can experiment with that research tool in their own research. So we encourage academics, scholars from any discipline to submit an application. January 15th is our deadline for that. We had a priority deadline of December 1st, but we are still accepting applications. So anyone that is curious about being a part of this community of practice with other academics and has a research project that they would like to or are curious about leveraging a research tool, please go ahead and visit our website and apply. And then also to plug again, Scholar's Edge, that is IHS's in-house research tool that we have developed and are continuing to develop with and for researchers and scholars. And you can request access to that, request more information also on our website. I shared that information earlier in the chat as well. We also have a lot of resources online, webinars, and so forth that cover that. Okay, we have 1 minute left and a lot more questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to more of them, but this has been a really rich conversation. So everyone, thank you so much for joining. This has really been a fascinating conversation. You have the link to the AI Accelerated Scholarship Program. I'd also plug, please visit the Cosmos Substack. They're turning out great content that's really readable and approachable. Professor Valier published recently, just a few weeks ago. Recommend that essay and all the good stuff that is coming out of Cosmos. To learn more about IHS programs and opportunities, virtual and in person, please visit our website, theihs.org. To learn about the Cosmos Institute, cosmos-institute.org is their website. Again, highly recommend the Substack. Thank you, everyone. Until next time, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, sir.